Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, let your thoughts drift gently as we take you on a peaceful journey. This is a space for calm, for quiet moments, and for the kind of stories that settle your heart and slow your breath. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes if you wish, and allow the world to soften around you. Now, let's begin with tonight's story. Today's story is titled, The Keeper of Time, The Choice of Memory. Chapter 1, A Quiet Breath Before the Door Opens. In a place untouched by urgency, where time drifted like mist across a still morning pond, a girl named Eleanor Vale sat at the edge of her bed, eyes closed, listening. No sound, at first only silence. But as her breath deepened, something subtle changed. There was a softness in the hush, like the whisper of an unseen hand brushing back the curtains of reality. And then, faintly, came the sound of wind moving through old branches, the distant chirp of a skylark, and the creak of ancient wood settling into another day. She opened her eyes. Sunlight spilled in golden puddles onto the wooden floorboards of her room, catching on the dust motes that drifted lazily through the still air. The lace curtains swayed just slightly, moved by a breeze that smelled of lavender and rain-damp earth. This was not her usual room in the city, where glass and steel boxed in the sky. This was Greymoor Cottage, tucked in a hidden part of the countryside few remembered, a place she had inherited from an aunt no one had seen in decades. She had arrived last night, after a train ride that felt like it had slipped through a crack in the present, each station quieter than the last, each tree along the path older, more knowing. Now it was morning. A new morning. And something about it felt expectant. Eleanor stepped onto the floor barefoot, letting the coolness of the wood ground her. The bed was old iron-framed, creaky, and the quilt smelled of rosemary. On the dresser sat a simple wooden comb, a cracked teacup with dried heather, and a key. She picked up the key, feeling the faint hum of warmth in its brass teeth. The key had been left on a folded letter. To Eleonora, when the morning feels different. She hadn't opened the letter yet. Somehow, she knew it wasn't time. Outside the window, the world was bathed in a soft golden fog, the kind that wrapped around trees and made them look like they were dreaming. The garden beyond the cottage had paths overgrown with ivy and foxglove, stone benches swallowed by moss, and a sundial whose shadow never moved. She stepped closer to the window, resting her fingertips against the glass. Birdsong fluttered from the trees. Somewhere out there, something waited. But for now, she turned back to the room. It smelled like time itself, books and beeswax and old wood soaked in 100 years of sun. She took her time dressing, pulling on a linen dress and soft shawl that had been left for her in the wardrobe. The fabric felt lived in, as though it remembered someone else's story. As she fastened the last button, she noticed a small envelope tucked into the seam of the shawl. Inside was a pressed violet and a line of handwriting, unfamiliar and looping. When the world slows, the old ways return. A shiver traced her spine, not of fear, but recognition. She stepped out into the hallway, her footsteps muted by the woven runner that stretched toward a staircase. On the wall, portraits stared from behind old glass, their eyes soft with secrets. She touched the railing. The wood was smooth, worn by years of hands like hers. Downstairs, the kitchen was still. A kettle rested on the stove. A row of dried herbs hung above the hearth, the scent of sage and mint mixing in the air. Everything was ready, waiting as though someone had known she would be here. She lit the stove, filling the kettle and setting it to boil. The sound of water warming filled the silence, steady and comforting. As it sang, she wandered the room, fingers trailing over forgotten books, jars labeled in faded ink, and a curious tin box tucked behind the flower canister. Inside the box, a compass that spun aimlessly, a black stone that pulsed softly with heat, and a scrap of parchment with one word written in deep red ink. Begin. She blinked. When she looked again, the compass had settled, pointing not north but toward the garden door. The kettle whistled, breaking the trance. She poured the tea, lavender, and honey, and sat at the small round table by the window. Outside, the mist curled like breath. She sipped slowly, letting warmth fill her chest. Something was happening. And deep down, she knew today was not just the start of a quiet day in the countryside. It was the first step into something older, quieter, and far more alive than anything she'd ever known. A place where the past breathed beside you. A place where stories remembered their tellers. And as she finished her tea, Eleanor rose, placed the mysterious key in her pocket, and stepped toward the garden door. The mist parted before her like a curtain on a forgotten stage. And beyond it, something was waiting to begin. Chapter 2, Arrival in the Forgotten Garden. The old door creaked open with the kind of sound that suggested it hadn't been moved in years, not harsh or rusty, but slow, groaning like something waking from a long dream. The hinges resisted slightly before giving way, and Eleonora stepped out into the morning mist that hung low over the ground like a woolen shawl tossed carelessly across the world. The garden was not manicured. It was wild. But not unkempt. There was intention in the chaos. The ivy knew where it was going. The foxgloves stood like little guardians in lavender rose. Moss claimed the stone walls, softening their edges, and a narrow cobblestone path stretched ahead, disappearing into the fog. Eleanor took a breath. The air out here felt heavier somehow, filled with the scent of damp leaves, faint rosemary, and something else like old parchment and candle smoke. A scent that didn't belong to any modern time. The key in her pocket buzzed faintly, like it was warming in response to her steps. She paused by a crumbling stone bench, partially buried in grass, and ran her fingers across its surface. Words were carved there, half faded but still legible under her touch. She who listens will hear what was forgotten. She turned toward the path. The fog parted slightly with each step, not pushed away by wind, but moving of its own will as though it recognized her. As though it approved. To her left stood a gnarled apple tree, its blossoms pale and fragrant despite the season. A rope swing, frayed but still strong, swayed slowly, though no wind touched it. Eleonora felt a flicker of memory that didn't belong to her. A girl laughing, her feet skimming the ground, a song hummed under breath. She blinked, and the vision was gone. But the feeling remained. Ahead, the path split in two. To the right, a low iron gate twisted with vines, half open, inviting. To the left, a tunnel of trees, thick with shadow, their branches intertwining above like clasped hands. She hesitated. And then, from the right path, a sound of faint trill of birdsong, 3 notes in a rhythm that echoed the tune she'd heard as she woke. Her choice made, Eleonora stepped through the gate. What lay beyond took her breath away. It was a sunken garden, circular, with stone steps descending into its heart. In the center stood a small fountain, dry but elegant, shaped like an open book with water once meant to pour down its pages. But what caught her attention wasn't the fountain. It was the statues. 12 of them, arranged in a circle. Each one different: young, old, male, female, some with crowns, some with cloaks, some with eyes closed and faces lifted toward the unseen sky. One was broken. Its head lay at its feet, weathered but strangely untouched by moss or mold. And in the base of that broken statue, something glinted, a lock, shaped like a flower bud. Eleonora took the key from her pocket. It pulsed in her palm. Carefully, reverently, she knelt and pressed the key into the lock. It fit. But it didn't turn. Instead, the garden breathed. Not in sound, but in sensation. The petals of every flower around her seemed to flutter inward for a moment, as if taking in a long breath, and then opened again. The trees rustled with purpose. And from beneath the dry fountain, a slow vibration rose through the earth, like a whisper trying to break through stone. She stood, heart racing. What had she just awakened? And then she saw it etched in silver into the edge of the fountain, only now revealed. The circle of 12 awaits the listener. Her fingers traced the line. The words shimmered faintly, as though reacting to her touch. Eleonora looked around. The statues watched silently. The mist shifted again, curling around her ankles, retreating into the hedges as if making way for something else. Behind her, a crow landed on the stone gate, tilting its head. It cawed once sharp and clear. Then silence. Eleonora turned slowly back to the center of the garden. And this time, when she looked at the fountain, it wasn't dry. Water, clear and impossibly still, pooled across the stone book's pages, reflecting the sky above, or rather, a sky that did not exist in this time. In its glassy surface, she saw something else. A library. Endless rows of shelves. Lanterns swinging on unseen breezes. And a doorway. A doorway that looked exactly like the one at the back of Greymoor Cottage. She stumbled back, blinking. The water returned to stillness. No more images. But the message was clear: this garden wasn't just a place. It was a threshold. and Eleonora had been invited to remember something no one else had in a very long time. Chapter 3, The Door Behind the Bookshelf. That night, Eleonora couldn't sleep. The garden's memory clung to her skin like cool mist. The fountain that reflected other worlds, the statues, the key that wouldn't turn, everything danced behind her eyelids as she lay in bed, eyes wide in the dark. The house had grown quiet around her, the kind of stillness that amplifies every heartbeat and creak of the floorboards. But something kept tugging at her thoughts, the image from the fountain. That door. She had seen it before. Sitting up, she lit the small oil lamp on the bedside table. The shadows trembled across the room, dancing along the walls and pooling in the corners. She pulled on a thick shawl and stepped barefoot onto the cold floor, her breath visible in the flickering light. Downstairs, the cottage felt older somehow. More alive. As though every crack in the plaster and every knot in the wood had shifted, watching her. She made her way past the kitchen and into a narrow hallway, where the air grew colder still. At the end of the hallway stood a tall bookshelf built into the wall, filled with weathered tomes. Some titles were written in languages she couldn't read, looping glyphs and faded sigils. Others were blank, their spines soft and smooth as worn velvet. And there it was. The faint outline of a scene behind the books. A rectangle. A door, just like the one in the fountain's reflection. Eleanora's hands trembled as she reached out. She pressed her palm against the center of the bookshelf. Nothing happened. Then she remembered the key. From the pocket of her robe, she drew the brass key. The warmth had returned, gentle and steady, pulsing with a quiet invitation. As she held it up to the bookshelf, the key began to glow faintly, not brightly, but enough to make the wood shimmer where it touched. Click. A soft sound, like a breath between words. The bookshelf shifted inward an inch. Eleonora stepped back. Then, with a sound like a sigh, the entire shelf swung inward, revealing a dark corridor. A soft breeze flowed out, carrying the scent of dust, old ink, and candle wax. And something else like starlight caught in a jar. She hesitated only a moment, then stepped inside. The door closed silently behind her. She stood at the top of a spiral staircase that descended into silence. Her lamp flickered, its light swallowed by the dark below. The steps were smooth stone, well-worn. She began her descent, her hand trailing the cold wall beside her. Each step echoed into the silence. And then light. Not from her lamp, but from below. She turned the last corner and gasped. Before her stretched the most magnificent library she had ever seen. The chamber was vast, impossibly large. Shelves rose higher than seemed architecturally possible, vanishing into a ceiling lost in shadow. Ladders glided silently along tracks. Candles floated mid-air, their flames steady, defying wind and logic. In the center of the room was a great round table made of dark wood, polished to a mirror sheen. And above it, a chandelier of glass feathers spun slowly in the still air. There were no cobwebs. No dust. This place was not forgotten. It had been waiting. Eleonora stepped forward, her feet silent on the warm stone. As she passed between two towering shelves, the books themselves seemed to shift, as if subtly aware of her presence. She stopped before a stand where a large book lay open. Its pages were blank. Then, slowly, words began to appear written by an invisible hand in golden ink. To the listener who walked the garden. To the keeper who holds the key. To the dreamer who remembers. You are home. The ink glowed for a moment, then faded. Eleonora stared. Her heart pounded with wonder. She ran her fingers across the page, smooth, cool parchment. Beneath her touch, the words shimmered again. A rustling sound drew her attention. From behind a nearby pillar stepped a figure. Not human. Tall and robed in silver threads, with a face like parchment and eyes like polished amber. It inclined its head to her in greeting. You have arrived, it said, its voice like wind through reeds. Not all do. Eleonora swallowed. What is this place? The figure gestured to the vast shelves. This is the archive of the forgotten. The resting place of stories untold, memories unlived, and paths left behind. She blinked. Why me? Because you listened. The answer was simple, final, and filled with meaning she couldn't yet understand. The figure turned and began walking between the shelves. Eleonora followed. They passed books that whispered as they walked by, their covers flexing like breathing skin. Others remained still and silent, waiting. Finally, they arrived at a pedestal. Upon it rested a small black book. This one is yours, the figure said. Eleonora reached out. Her fingers touched the cover. And the book opened not in pages, but in light. Scenes bloomed into the air above the pedestal, her first walk in the garden, the swing swaying by itself, the statues, the fountain, the glowing key. Everything she had seen. Everything she had felt. This place, the figure said gently, records not what is, but what is remembered. And what must not be forgotten. Eleonora stood in awe. And somewhere, deep inside her, something stirred a sense of purpose, ancient and new. The key had not only opened a door, it had opened her. Chapter 4, The Statues of the Silent Circle. Morning returned like a gentle hand brushing over her dreams, and Eleonora woke not to the sound of birds, but to a quiet pulse beneath the floorboards like the heartbeat of the house itself. She lay still for a moment, listening. It hadn't been a dream. The library. The floating candles. The book that bloomed with light and memory. She sat up slowly, the brass key still warm beneath her pillow, and the faint scent of lavender and old paper still clinging to her hair. Her hand drifted to the pocket of her robe, where the black book now rested, real, physical. It pulsed faintly when her fingers brushed it, like a living thing. Outside, the fog hadn't lifted. In fact, it had thickened. Drawn by something she couldn't name, Eleonora pulled on her boots and coat and stepped outside, the key around her neck now on a silver chain she had found hanging in the wardrobe as if left there for her. The moment she crossed the threshold of the garden door, the mist shifted and opened, forming a clear path along the cobblestones, leading her back to the sunken circle. The statues waited. 12 forms in stone, each caught in some moment of story, hands raised, eyes closed, lips parted as though just about to speak. The broken one at the far edge still lay in ruin, but now Eleonora could feel something in the air around it. A presence. She stepped down the mossy stairs, her boots making no sound. The fountain in the center had returned to stillness, no longer glowing or showing reflections. But the energy, the charge in the air was stronger. She approached the broken statue. The key around her neck pulsed, growing warmer. A voice, soft and fragmented, drifted into her mind. Not spoken aloud, but felt inside her chest like distant thunder. You see, and so you are seen. You hear, and so the silence speaks. She knelt beside the fallen head of the statue, brushing moss from its features. The stone was smooth, serene, a woman with her eyes half closed, lips tilted in the hint of a smile. The same smile Eleonora had seen on her own face. In a dream she didn't remember having. She touched the base again, where the keyhole had once glinted. This time, the key turned. A grinding sound rumbled beneath the earth, and the ground trembled softly. The center of the fountain split open, not with violence, but elegance, as if petals were parting. Within, a spiral staircase of marble descended into the unknown. Eleonora stood. And the statues moved. Only slightly. A tilt of the head. A shift of the gaze. But she saw it no longer frozen entirely in stone, they were watching her now. The voice returned. The circle knows its keeper. The past has chosen its vessel. 12 walked once. Now only one returns. One of the statues, an older man in long robes, his stone hand stretched outward, began to glow, a faint shimmer of blue tracing ancient runes across his chest and arms. Words burned into the air before her, glowing gold. First remembered, Aravel, the binder of echoes. The others remained still, yet Eleonora could feel it. Each one of these statues was a person. A story. A keeper who once was. A guardian of something deeper than memory. She turned to the open stairway in the fountain's heart. The mist did not touch it. The light around it was faint but constant, and from below came a soft, melodic humming, like a song being hummed by a choir of distant voices. As she placed one foot on the top step, she heard the whisper again. You are not the first, but you may be the last. She descended, deeper than before, into a spiral chamber lined with glowing symbols and glass-like walls. Reflections danced beside her, not of herself, but of others, a girl with flame-red hair holding a quill, a boy with storm-colored eyes standing in the rain, a woman with silver bells in her hair, whispering into the ear of a wolf. Each one, past keepers. Each reflection faded as she passed. At the bottom of the stairs, the chamber opened into a round vault, ringed with pedestals. Upon each pedestal sat an object. A compass that spun only in dreams. A feather made of glass. A cloak stitched with starlight. And in the center, a stone chair carved with 12 intertwined symbols. The seat of the last listener. Eleonora stepped forward. As she did, the 12 symbols pulsed with golden light, and the chair whispered her name not with sound, but memory. And something deeper woke in her. Something ancient. Something that had waited for her for a very long time. Chapter 5, The Memory That Wasn't Hers. Eleonora stood before the stone chair, the 12 symbols circling its base glowing softly like fireflies caught in a silent orbit. Each symbol was different, some curved like vines, others jagged like lightning or flowing like water. Her fingers hovered over them, drawn not by logic, but instinct. One symbol pulsed brighter than the rest, a spiral etched in silver that shimmered faintly as she stepped closer. She reached out and touched it. The world vanished. Not in a blink, not in darkness, rather, it unfolded, like a book opening to a forgotten page. Suddenly, she was somewhere else. The air was hotter, scented with parchment and candle smoke. She stood in a room lined with scrolls and books, their spines etched in gold and charcoal. A storm raged beyond tall arched windows, rain slicing across the panes like quills on parchment. But inside, the room pulsed with calm. And in that room stood a girl, not Eleonora, but through her. The girl had darker hair, coiled tightly behind her head, and eyes like dusk, thoughtful, focused. She was writing. The ink danced across the page, not in English, but in symbols Eleonora couldn't read, and yet somehow understood. They weren't just letters. They were memories, captured in strokes and curves. Stories extracted from somewhere deep, ancient, almost sacred. The storm outside flashed lightning, illuminating the walls. On them, painted by hand, were symbols Eleonora had seen only hours before, carved into the pedestal of the glowing statue, a revel, the binder of echoes. Eleonora watched, no, felt as a revel rose from her desk, her hands stained with ink and magic. A knock at the door. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The door opened of its own accord, and a man stepped through, his robe soaked, hair clinging to his cheeks, holding a blade that pulsed with light. "It's begun," he said simply. A revel didn't flinch. "I know," she replied. And then she reached for a silver vial on the desk and poured a single drop into the page she had written. The ink hissed, then glowed, before being absorbed entirely. The scroll rolled itself shut, sealing something inside. A memory. Eleonora felt the weight of it as if it had been poured into her own chest. And just as quickly as it had begun, she returned. The light dimmed. The stone floor was beneath her feet once more. Her breath caught in her throat. The chamber was still. The spiral symbol beneath her feet had stopped glowing. But now, the glass feather on one of the pedestals shimmered. She approached it. As her hand reached toward it, the whisper came again. To know what was, you must carry what remained. Her fingers brushed the feather. It vanished. But in its place, a feather-light warmth settled in her palm. And with it, words. Not whispered. Not spoken. But remembered. We did not guard knowledge. We became it. When the stars forget their names, we remind them. When the echoes lose their source, we give them form. Eleonora stumbled back, her breath shuddering. These weren't thoughts she'd formed. They were being given to her. She turned back to the chair. A second symbol was glowing now, a mark like a rising sun. Behind her, one of the other statues in the garden, though still distant, stirred. She could feel it through the connection now open between her and the garden above. They were awakening, one by one. And she was beginning to carry their lives inside her. Not just stories. Not just dreams. Memories. And some of them, she feared, would not be so gentle as a Ravely's. But it was too late now to turn back. The circle had begun. And Eleonora Vale, listener of the forgotten, would be the voice for those who could no longer speak. Chapter 6, The Second Keeper's Choice. The moment Eleonora stepped away from the stone chair, a strange calm settled over her. But beneath that calm, there was something else, an electric hum that seemed to vibrate through the stone floor and into her very bones. She had touched the feather, and now she could feel the weight of 1,000 lives that were no longer hers but were waiting for her to uncover. Her mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. The words that had come to her weren't her own. They had been gifted, or perhaps passed down, and now they had settled into the very marrow of her being. The sensation was both foreign and familiar, like remembering a song she had never heard but knew intimately. And then, just as the room around her seemed to settle into stillness, the symbols beneath her feet began to shift. Not the glowing lights or the pulsing shapes, those had already faded, but the very patterns of the chamber. The walls, once distant and aloof, seemed to draw closer, as though the space itself was folding inward to reveal something hidden. The ground beneath her shifted, and a gentle breeze began to stir, though there was no source for it. Eleonora took a cautious step forward, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. One of the statues, the one nearest the fountain, began to glow faintly. This time, it wasn't a soft light. It was a brilliant, silvery white, so sharp it almost hurt to look at. Eleonora turned her gaze toward it. The statue, a woman with a hood pulled over her head and her hands pressed together, was shifting. Not moving, but becoming something else. As the light intensified, it became clear, this was not just a statue, but a vessel. A keeper, trapped within stone for an age, now beginning to stir. The woman's eyes, once stone, began to open. Eleonora felt a ripple in the air, as if the very fabric of time had frayed. "You're not her." Eleonora's breath caught in her throat. The voice was low, almost mournful, but unmistakably clear. The woman's eyes deep, ancient, fixed on her. "You are the listener, yes." The woman's voice was like wind through a forest of dead trees. It rattled the walls and the stones underfoot. "But you are not mine to guide. You are mine to test." The figure raised her hands, still bound in stone, and when she spoke again, her voice rang out with a sharpness that filled the chamber. "The choice is yours, listener." Eleonora didn't respond. She couldn't. Her mind was spinning, trying to understand the gravity of what was happening. The keeper's voice continued, as though Eleonora's silence was expected. "There are 12 of us," the keeper said, her voice a whisper in the silence, "but only one can bear the weight of the truth. You have awakened the first of El, the binder of echoes. You know her memories. You know her path." The statue's hand slowly unclasped, revealing a dagger made of shadow, its blade curling into the air, as though reaching for something only it could see. "But you have yet to see the truth," the keeper continued, her gaze turning inward. "For each keeper, a secret is born. A path diverges, and a choice must be made." Eleonora's breath caught. She stepped forward, unsure of why or how. "What secret?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What is it that I must choose?" The keeper's lips curled into a sorrowful smile. "The second choice." The dagger, still suspended in the air, twisted. Its shadow began to spread across the chamber like ink in water. "There is a memory within you, Eleonora Vale. One that was never meant to be." The keeper's gaze fixed upon her, unblinking. "It is not your memory, but one that you will inherit. And with it, the power to change. But not without cost." The air grew thick with tension. Eleonora stepped back, her mind swirling. The memory, was it the one that had surfaced in the library? Was it the one that she had felt inside the book she touched? Was there a truth hidden within her, waiting to break free? "The second keeper's choice is one of destruction and creation," the keeper whispered, her figure beginning to dissolve into light, "but which path you take, listener, will be up to you." The light of the chamber dimmed once more. The statues stood motionless again, their glowing forms fading into stone. The rumbling, the whispers, the tension, all of it seemed to fall away into silence. Eleonora stood alone, her pulse racing in her ears. But now, she knew one thing for sure. The choice wasn't just hers to make. It was the world's. And the world was waiting to see what she would do with it. Chapter 7, The Burden of Creation. The silence in the chamber pressed against Eleonora like a heavy fog. Her breath came in shallow bursts, her hands trembling as they gripped the stone pedestal before her. The keeper no, the second keeper had vanished, leaving only her cryptic words and the shadow of a choice. But the choice was not clear, nor was it solely hers to make. It was the world's choice. And it was her role to carry the weight of it. The chamber felt colder now, the faint light from the glowing symbols casting long shadows across the walls. Eleonora's gaze drifted back to the center of the room, where the stone chair still waited, its markings faintly shimmering in the dim light. She stepped forward slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. The words of the second keeper echoed in her mind, over and over. A memory that was never meant to be. A path of destruction and creation. What was the secret that lay hidden inside her? Why had the memory, this foreign memory, settled in her soul, like an uninvited guest that would not leave? And what was the cost of remembering something that should have been forgotten? She reached into her pocket, pulling out the black book that had been with her since she first stepped into this forgotten realm. Its pages were still blank, its weight pressing against her palms. The strange, glowing words from before flickered in her mind, but this time, they felt different. To know what was, you must carry what remained. Eleonora opened the book, its cover cool against her fingertips. As she turned the first page, the ink began to form slowly at first, then with increasing speed as if the book were reacting to her presence. The words on the page were unfamiliar, foreign symbols, like those from the garden and the statues. But as they formed, she felt the memory stirring inside her, like something waking from a deep slumber. And then, in a rush of clarity, she saw it. The vision was sharp and vivid, a memory she had never lived, yet somehow knew as if it were her own. She stood in a vast, ruined hall, the remnants of broken stone pillars scattered around her like fallen giants. The ceiling was high and dark, with strange runes etched into the stone above her. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the destruction, the silence. It was a place that had known both creation and decay. Before her, a figure stood, a man, tall and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of pain and wisdom. His robes were tattered, but they glimmered faintly with an inner light. He extended his hand toward her, holding something, a small, glowing orb. "Take it," he said, his voice echoing in the hollow chamber. Eleonora reached for the orb without thinking, her fingers brushing its smooth surface. As soon as she touched it, light exploded, blinding her for a moment. When the light faded, the orb was gone, and she was standing in the center of a newly formed garden, surrounded by lush, vibrant life. The ground beneath her was soft, warm, teeming with growth. Flowers bloomed in every direction, and the air was thick with the scent of life and new beginnings. But at the edges of this vibrant world, she could see something else, something dark, an ever-growing shadow that seemed to twist and slither, creeping toward her garden like a living thing. The man's voice echoed again, but now it was no longer kind. To create, he said, his tone sharp, bitter, you must destroy what came before. And to keep this creation alive, you must give up what is most precious. The vision began to fade, the shadows creeping ever closer. Eleonora tried to scream, but her voice was swallowed by the darkness. The last thing she heard was the sound of a heartbeat, hers. She gasped, the vision retreating as the book slammed shut in her hands. Her pulse thundered in her ears, her body shaking from the intensity of what she had just witnessed. It was a choice, just as the second keeper had said. She could create, build something new, a world full of life, of stories, of memory. But in doing so, she would have to sacrifice what had come before. The world she knew, the memories that had shaped her, the lives that had lived and passed, everything would have to be forgotten. But the alternative was just as dangerous. If she chose not to destroy, the darkness would consume the creation. The shadow that had begun in the garden, the one she had felt creeping into the corners of her mind, would grow. It would twist everything, corrupting the beauty she had glimpsed, turning it into something unrecognizable. And yet, could she truly destroy the past? Could she let go of everything she had ever known, for the sake of something new? Was it worth it? She stood in the center of the room, the weight of the book heavy in her hands. The symbols beneath her feet had stopped glowing, but she felt the ground beneath her shift, as though it were preparing for her decision. A sound broke the silence, a quiet whisper. Your choice, Eleonora. The world cannot wait. She turned to face the source of the voice, but the keeper was gone. The statues, too, had returned to their stone silence. Eleonora was alone with her choice. What path would she choose? To destroy the old world, to create a new one, or to protect the memory and risk the darkness consuming everything? The burden of creation or the weight of remembrance? Her heart beat loud in her chest as she stepped back toward the stone chair. The circle had been set in motion. And now, Eleonora had to decide if she would complete it or break it forever. Chapter 8, The Price of the Final Memory. The air was heavy, thick with the weight of 1,000 untold stories. Eleonora stood at the heart of the chamber, the book in her hands now feeling like a stone. The swirling glow of the symbols on the floor had dimmed to a mere whisper of light, leaving the chamber cold and still. She couldn't move. Couldn't speak. All she could hear was her heart, pounding in the silence, as though it too was waiting for her to make the decision. The choice. To create. Or to remember. She could feel the darkness that had touched her once before, that shadow, growing. Not around her, but inside her, creeping through the cracks in her soul like water through a broken dam. If she embraced creation, she would give up everything, her past, her memories, the lives of those who had walked before her. But if she refused to let go, she would doom the very thing she sought to protect. The shadow would grow stronger, feeding on her hesitation, twisting the beauty she had glimpsed into something vile and broken. Eleonora's mind raced as she took a hesitant step forward, her fingers brushing the edge of the stone chair. The weight of the choice felt unbearable. She could feel the past tugging at her, pulling her toward everything that had been. The faces of the keepers. The garden. Arabelle's gentle smile. Her throat tightened. She could still hear the voices of the others, though they were mere whispers now. Echoes of those who had made their own choices before her. Arabelle, the first keeper, hadn't chosen for herself. She had bound herself to the past, tied to the memories of others. Was that the price she had paid? And the second keeper. She had warned Eleonora that the choice was more than hers alone. The light around her seemed to flicker. A faint voice, gentle but powerful, floated to her from beyond the veil of memories. You are the listener, Eleonora. But there are many who have listened before you. You stand in their shadows, but you must stand alone now. Will you repeat their path, or will you carve your own? The words settled over her like a shroud. The world around her began to shift again, and suddenly, she was no longer in the chamber. She stood in a garden, just like the one she had seen before, the one where the shadow had been creeping closer, threatening to overtake the light. The difference now was the feel of it. The once vibrant colors had faded, the flowers wilting. The trees were bare, their branches twisted and gnarled, like the fingers of a long dead hand reaching toward the sky. The air smelled of decay, of things left too long in the dark. And in the center of it all, the fountain, its basin dry, cracked, its stone worn and chipped. A figure stood by the fountain. It was Arabelle. But this wasn't the same peaceful, warm figure that had welcomed her. This was someone different, eyes hollow and dark, her robes torn, her hair wild, and her hands shaking as though the weight of the world had crushed her. She turned toward Eleonora. You failed, listener. Eleonora took a step back, the ground beneath her cracking with the sound of breaking stone. What? What do you mean? Eleonora's voice shook. I'm trying to make the right choice. I don't. You don't understand, do you? Arabelle's voice was like the wind howling through the barren trees. The shadow doesn't just come for those who forget, it comes for those who remember, too. Those who hold on to the past too tightly, it consumes them. Eleonora's heart twisted. Was this what Arabelle had chosen? Had she tried to keep everything, to protect what was dear, and yet the shadow had won? I thought I could save everything, Eleonora whispered. You cannot save the past. Arabelle's eyes burned with a fire that was now desperate, mad. You must choose, Eleonora. Let go. Or everything you hold dear will be destroyed, piece by piece, until there's nothing left but darkness. Eleonora's chest tightened. Her mind raced, her breath coming faster now. She could feel the weight of her choice like a stone crushing her ribs. She wanted to scream, but the words caught in her throat. I'm not ready, she whispered. I can't. Then you will watch everything burn. Arabelle's voice had softened now, but it was filled with something more sorrowful than anger. You are the listener. But your memories, they will be your prison. With that, the figure of Arabelle vanished, and the garden began to crumble around Eleonora. She stumbled back to the stone chair, gripping its edges as the world twisted. The vision of the garden was fading now, but the feeling of loss, of decay, remained. And yet, the words still echoed. You cannot save the past. Eleonora's heart beat louder, faster. Her mind was spinning, but there was one thing that cut through the fog. The key. She hadn't thought of it until now, but it was there. The key that had unlocked this world, this choice. It was still hanging around her neck, pulsing softly, as if it, too, had a life of its own. The key had been given to her for a reason. It was her choice. And with that understanding, a new clarity settled over her. She had to decide. Was she willing to sacrifice everything to create something new? Was the price of creation truly worth it? Or would she risk everything to protect the past, knowing that she could lose it all to the darkness? But as she stared down at the key, her thoughts were interrupted by a soft whisper, barely audible, but still there. The world is made not by the one who remembers, but by the one who dares to forget. Chapter 9, The Choice of Creation. The silence in the chamber was deafening now, pressing down on Eleonora like a weight she could no longer ignore. The faint glow from the symbols on the floor had faded completely, leaving her standing alone, surrounded by nothing but shadows and the heavy burden of her choice. The key around her neck pulsed softly, as though urging her to move, to decide, to act. But each step forward felt like wading through deep water, the weight of what she was about to do pulling at her, sinking her further into uncertainty. To create. The words from Arabelle echoed in her mind. Or to protect what remains. Eleonora's fingers tightened around the stone chair, the rough texture grounding her. She could feel the pulse of the key against her chest, its warmth a constant reminder that the power to change, to shape, and to destroy lay within her grasp. But the cost. She glanced toward the fountain in the center of the room, now dry and cracked. It was the same fountain from the garden, the same one that had once shimmered with life and reflected the light of forgotten stars. In its emptiness, she saw only the shadow, a dark presence that seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. You are the listener, Eleonora. The words from the keeper's voice reverberated once again. The world is waiting for you to choose. Her mind raced. What was the right choice? Could she destroy the past, erase the memories that had shaped her, and create something new? Was that the only way to save the world from the encroaching darkness? Or was there another way? Could she find a path where the past and the future could coexist? The garden she had seen, the crumbling statues, the once vibrant world, it all seemed to come down to this. The memory that wasn't hers to carry, the secret she was forced to bear, the burden of those who had come before her, all of it rested on her shoulders. Remember, Arabelle's voice whispered through her thoughts again. You cannot save what was. You can only choose what will be. Eleonora closed her eyes. What would she do? The memories of the keepers Arabelle, the second keeper, the garden, the fountain filled her mind. She could feel them, like whispers in her soul. The weight of those lives, the choices they had made, the sacrifices they had endured, it was all a part of her now, intertwined with her very being. And yet, there was still a small, quiet voice inside her, one that had been whispering from the moment she stepped into Greymoor Cottage, from the moment she had touched the key. The past didn't have to be erased. It could be preserved. It could live. She opened her eyes and looked once again at the stone chair. The symbols beneath her feet were faintly glowing once more, their soft light casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and sway like whispers of the past. Eleonora stepped forward, her feet steady now, her heart no longer burdened by fear. She reached for the key around her neck. This was the moment. In that instant, the ground beneath her trembled. The air grew thick, swirling around her like a storm just beginning to form. But instead of retreating in fear, Eleonora embraced it. This was her choice. The choice to create, but to create something that would hold the past, not destroy it. She placed the key into the fountain's broken basin. And with a deep breath, she twisted it. The air shattered with a sound like glass breaking. Light exploded outward from the fountain, filling the chamber with warmth and brilliance. For a moment, everything blinded her, and then the garden. The one she had seen in her vision, the one she had almost lost, was back. It was even more beautiful than before. The flowers bloomed, their colors bright and vivid, the trees swaying in a breeze that had not touched them in ages. The sunlight poured through the canopy of leaves, casting dappled shadows across the ground. And the fountain, which had once been dry and lifeless, was now flowing with water clear, sparkling, and alive. But more than that, Eleonora saw the statues. The 12 keepers, standing proudly around the garden, their forms still, but their eyes open. Each one was bathed in light, as though they were waking from their slumber. The shadow, the darkness was gone. It was contained. Eleonora stepped back, her heart swelling with emotion as she took in the sight before her. She had done it. She had created. But she had also remembered. The past would not be erased. It would not be forgotten. The memories of the keepers, the lives that had shaped this world, would be preserved alive, thriving in the garden she had created. But there was more. As the light began to fade, Eleonora felt the presence of the keepers around her. They were no longer just memories or echoes. They were with her, part of the world she had helped shape. You chose wisely, listener, a voice said, soft and full of pride. It was the first keeper's voice, Arabelle's voice, but it was no longer filled with sorrow. It was filled with hope. Eleonora smiled. She had done it. She had preserved the past while creating a future where both could exist, side by side. The choice had not been easy, but it had been hers. And the world had changed because of it. Chapter 10, The Dawn of a New Beginning. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long, gentle shadows across the garden that had once been lost. Now, it stood in full bloom, alive with energy, rich with the vibrancy of creation. The garden wasn't just a place of beauty. It was a symbol, a living, breathing testament to Eleanora's choice. She stood in the center, her gaze sweeping over the blooming flowers, the glistening water of the fountain, the stone statues that now watched over her. The keepers, once bound in stone and memory, now stood as silent sentinels, their eyes open, their spirits woven into the very fabric of this new world. Her world. Eleanora's heart swelled with both awe and a sense of quiet responsibility. She had created this, yes, but she had also preserved what came before. It was a delicate balance, a living testament to the past and the future working in harmony. She had not erased the old world. Instead, she had made it a part of something new. The key around her neck pulsed softly, its warmth like a steady heartbeat, reminding her of the path she had chosen. She looked down at the glowing symbols beneath her feet, the same symbols that had once felt so heavy, so fraught with tension. Now, they were simply reminders of what she had done, what she had protected. But the journey was far from over. As she stood, taking in the beauty of the garden, a faint voice echoed through her thoughts. "Eleanora." She turned. The voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. It was Arabelle, the first keeper, speaking from beyond the veil, from the realm that existed between the memories and the future. "You have done what no one before you could," Arabelle's voice said, full of quiet pride. "You have brought balance. But now, your true task begins." Eleanora felt a ripple of unease pass through her, but she didn't flinch. She had chosen this path. She had chosen to become the keeper of creation, the one who would protect both the memories of the past and the promise of the future. "What must I do now?" Eleanora asked, her voice steady but filled with the weight of the responsibility she now carried. "There is much to rebuild, Eleanora," Arabelle replied. "The past is no longer something to be feared or forgotten. But it is also fragile. The darkness that once sought to consume everything is not gone. It is contained, yes, but it is not gone. You will need to guard this world, guard the memories, and guard the path forward." Eleanora nodded slowly, understanding the depth of the task ahead. She had not just created a new world, she had become its protector. She would need to stand between the past and the future, ensuring that neither was lost, and neither was corrupted. "And how do I begin?" Eleanora asked, her voice soft, but filled with resolve. "You have already begun," Arabelle's voice said. "You are the listener, the keeper. The world will look to you for guidance, for answers. They will come to you with questions, with doubts. And it will be your responsibility to guide them, not by erasing the past, but by helping them remember it, and by teaching them to shape their future with that knowledge. Eleonora turned toward the fountain, her eyes drawn to the rippling water. The world had been reborn, and now it was time for her to shape it, to guide it. But she could not do this alone. She stepped forward, her heart firm, her resolve stronger than it had ever been. She felt the presence of the keepers around her, each one still standing watch, their spirits entwined with the land. But she knew that the work ahead would require more than just memories, it would require the living. She would have to reach out, to share what she had learned, to teach others how to live in harmony with the world, how to remember the past without being consumed by it. The journey would be long. There would be challenges, struggles, and moments of doubt. But Eleonora knew that as long as she held onto the key to both creation and remembrance, she could face whatever came. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but filled with gratitude. "For everything." A final whisper from Aravel floated through her mind, soft as a breeze. "You are not alone, Eleonora. We are always with you." And with that, the garden seemed to grow even brighter, more alive. The light shifted, casting a golden glow across the landscape. It was the dawn of a new day, a new beginning. Eleonora was ready. Chapter 11, The Guardians of Memory. The morning mist still clung to the garden, though the sun had risen high enough to scatter most of it. Eleonora stood at the heart of the garden once more, her eyes sweeping over the vibrant colors of the flowers, the shimmering water in the fountain, and the stone statues of the keepers who stood in silent vigil. It was peaceful here, but there was a quiet tension that hung in the air, the weight of responsibility. She had created this world, yes, but now it was time to protect it. To guide it. To remember. The key around her neck pulsed softly, reminding her of her role. She was the listener, the keeper of memories, the one who had woven the past and the future together. The garden was a symbol of that harmony, but it was also fragile. The darkness that had once sought to consume it was still there, lurking in the corners, waiting for an opportunity to return. And that was why Eleonora had to be vigilant. She stepped forward, feeling the soft earth beneath her feet. As she moved, the air around her seemed to shift, the garden reacting to her presence. The keeper's eyes, those of Aravel, the second keeper, and the others followed her every step, as though watching over her, guiding her. But there was something else now, a presence. Something new, something she hadn't sensed before. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves above her, and for a moment, she thought she heard a faint voice carried on the breeze. "Eleonora." She froze. The voice was familiar, but not one she had heard in the garden before. It was the voice of someone else. A figure stepped from the shadows, emerging from the far corner of the garden. A tall man, cloaked in deep blue, his features hidden beneath a hood. He walked with a purpose, his gaze focused ahead, but there was a certain familiarity in the way he moved. Eleonora's heart skipped a beat. She could feel the power in him, but it wasn't like the keepers. This was something different, something ancient. He stopped a few feet away, his voice low and steady. "Eleonora Vale," he said, his tone commanding yet calm. "You have become the keeper, the protector of memories. But there are those who would seek to change the past." Eleonora felt a chill creep up her spine. She hadn't expected anyone else to come, not like this. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the uncertainty stirring within her. "And what do you mean, change the past?" The man raised his head, his features coming into focus. His eyes were dark, deep as the void, and his face held the marks of someone who had lived for ages, perhaps longer than any keeper. "I am Eric's," he said, his voice softening, "one of the guardians of memory. We are the ones who ensure that the past is not forgotten or twisted by those who would seek to rewrite it. We guard the threads of time." Eleonora felt a strange unease settle in her chest. Guardians of memory. She had heard the term before, but never in such context. "What do you want with me?" she asked, taking a cautious step back. The garden seemed to darken just slightly, as though in response to her growing uncertainty. Eric stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "The path you've chosen is a noble one, Eleonora. But it is also a dangerous one. You've brought the past into the future, preserving the memories of the keepers, the world that once was. But the past is not something that can be easily held. The threads of memory can fray. They can be lost. And there are those who would seek to undo what you've done." Eleonora clenched her fists, feeling the heat of the key around her neck. "I will not let that happen," she said, her voice strong. "I've made my choice. This world will not be erased." Eric studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Then you will have to face those who wish to take that choice from you. There are forces in the shadows, ancient, forgotten powers that will stop at nothing to rewrite the past. To destroy the memories you've preserved. They will seek to unmake what you have created." Eleonora felt the air grow colder. "Who are they?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Eric's gaze darkened. "They are the forgetting ones. They are not of this world, nor are they part of the old order. They are creatures of void, of nothingness, seeking to tear apart the very fabric of time. They will stop at nothing to erase what has been, and they will use you, Eleonora, if you allow them." Eleonora's heart raced, her mind swirling with the weight of his words. The forgetting ones. Creatures that sought to unmake time itself, to erase the memories she had so carefully protected. But why her? Why had they chosen to come for her now? "What must I do?" Eleonora asked, her voice tied with determination. "You must protect the threads of time," Eric's replied. "You are the keeper now, and you will be the one to guard the memories of the past, the world that once was. But you will also need to gather allies, for the forces that seek to rewrite history are many, and they will not stop until they have taken everything. Eleonora nodded. The weight of the task ahead of her settled onto her shoulders, but it was not a burden she could shrink from. She had already chosen. And now, she had to fight for the world she had created. For the memories she had preserved. "You're not alone in this," Eric's added, his tone softer now. "There are others, scattered across the world, who have also guarded the past. You must find them, Eleonora. Together, you can protect the future." Eleonora's gaze turned to the garden around her, the stone statues of the keepers watching over her like silent sentinels. She felt their presence, their spirits, as though they were guiding her, watching over her as she stepped forward into the unknown. "I will," she said, her voice firm. "I will protect the past and the future." Chapter 12, The Call of the Forgotten Ones. The sun had begun to set, casting a warm amber glow over the garden, but Eleonora couldn't shake the cold unease that had settled in her chest. Eric's warning echoed in her mind, the thought of the forgetting one's creatures from beyond time, bent on erasing the memories she had worked so hard to protect. She was no longer just a keeper of creation. She was now its defender. The key still hung around her neck, warm and heavy, a constant reminder of the path she had chosen. But the weight of responsibility was far heavier now, with the knowledge that enemies were coming not just for her, but for everything she had created, for the very threads of time that bound the world together. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and rain. Eleonora stood in the heart of the garden, her gaze fixed on the horizon. The sky was streaked with the colors of dusk, the landscape bathed in golden light. For a moment, the world seemed peaceful, beautiful, even. But she knew better. The peace was fragile. Eric's had told her to gather allies. And though she didn't know exactly where to begin, she understood that her journey was no longer just about preserving memories. It was about ensuring that the future would not be torn apart by those who wished to forget. With resolve hardening in her chest, she turned away from the garden and began walking toward the stone steps that led back into the cottage. The house, once a quiet haven, now felt like a hub, the center of her new world, the place where she could begin to piece together the next steps of her journey. The door to the cottage opened with a soft creak, and as she entered, the cool air inside felt different, heavier. The walls that once seemed comforting now seemed to hold secrets, as if the house itself had been waiting for her to step into this new role. The key in her pocket pulsed again, and without thinking, she walked over to the wooden chest she had discovered earlier, the one that had once held the compass, the stone, and the strange vial. She opened it, revealing a set of old maps, some of which had been folded and tucked away in the corner. Eleonora spread them out on the table, her fingers tracing the faded lines of ink. There were markings, old names, places that seemed distant and forgotten. She had seen maps like these in the library books, with notes and markings on places that were no longer in the world, or places that had been lost to time. The forgotten places. The words came to her as a whisper, unbidden. She had to go to these places. They were the key to finding the allies she needed, the ones who had guarded the memories of the world before. They were out there, scattered, waiting for someone to find them. She rolled the map up, tucking it under her arm, and stood. She would need to move quickly, to act before the forgetting ones could make their move. She couldn't afford to wait. With a deep breath, she stepped back outside, the cool evening air wrapping around her like a cloak. The garden, now bathed in the light of the setting sun, seemed almost peaceful, as though it, too, was awaiting her next move. The journey ahead would not be easy. She had to travel far and wide, seeking out the guardians of memory who had once protected the past. These were the ancient beings who had watched over the memories of the world, and perhaps they could help her defend against the forgetting ones. Her first destination was the Sapphire Peaks, a mountain range to the north that was said to house an ancient temple and old sanctuary of the keepers, long since abandoned. She would have to journey through forests, cross rivers, and climb treacherous paths to reach it. But she couldn't afford to wait. Eleonora reached the edge of the garden, her steps sure and steady. The mist had returned, swirling around her ankles, and she felt the cool dampness on her skin. But it wasn't the mist that made her pause. It was the feeling, the presence that seemed to watch her from the shadows. She turned, her eyes narrowing. The garden seemed to shift, the statues watching her closely, their expressions unreadable. A sound. A rustling, almost too quiet to hear, came from the trees. And then, from the shadow of a nearby oak, a figure stepped out. It was another keeper. But not one she recognized. The figure was tall and cloaked in dark green robes, a hood pulled low over their face. They moved gracefully, almost silently, their steps soundless on the damp ground. Eleonora's heart skipped a beat. Had they come to stop her? To prevent her from leaving? Eleonora Vale, the figure said, their voice smooth, low, but filled with ancient power. The time has come. Eleonora's hand instinctively went to the key around her neck, but she didn't feel threatened. Not exactly. There was something about this figure, something familiar, but distant. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice steady despite the confusion swirling in her mind. The figure stepped closer, the shadow seeming to follow them like a cloak. They pulled back their hood, revealing a face that was both ageless and strange. Their eyes were a deep, intense green, as though they had seen centuries pass before them, but their gaze was warm, welcoming. "I am Lyra, one of the original guardians," the figure said, bowing slightly. "And I have come to help." Chapter 13, The Guardians Unite. The air in the garden grew still as Lyra stepped closer, her presence like a breeze that stirred the leaves around her. Eleonora watched her carefully, still unsure whether to trust the figure that had suddenly appeared, but something in Lyra's gaze, the way she moved, the way the shadows seemed to dance around her, spoke of power. Ancient power. "I didn't expect to find you here," Eleonora said, her voice calm but filled with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Who are the guardians, really? And why have you come?" Lyra smiled gently, her eyes glimmering with knowledge that seemed to span millennia. The guardians are the keepers of time, Eleonora, she said softly. We are bound to the flow of memories, the threads of past, present, and future. Our duty is to protect the balance, to ensure the memories of the world are preserved. And it is not only the past that we guard but the future as well. Eleonora felt a ripple of understanding sweep through her. The more Lyra spoke, the more she began to understand the weight of her role, and the delicate balance she had worked so hard to create. She wasn't just a keeper of memories, she was the defender of time itself. But why now? Eleonora asked, her brow furrowing. Why come to me now, after everything has already begun? Lyra's smile faded, replaced by a look of quiet urgency. The forgetting ones are stirring, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. They are ancient forces, born from the cracks between moments in time. They exist beyond the flow of memory. And they seek to unravel it all, to erase what is and was, and twist the future into something they control. You have already felt their presence, haven't you? Eleonora nodded, her hand instinctively going to the key around her neck. She felt its pulse once again, a reminder of the responsibility that weighed so heavily on her shoulders. I thought I could protect everything, she said softly. But I fear the darkness is too powerful. It wants to erase the past, the memories. If they succeed... Lyra's eyes locked onto hers, steady and strong. If they succeed, Eleonora, it will not just be the past that is lost, she said firmly. It will be the very soul of the world. The world as you know it, the memories that form the very fabric of existence will be unmade. A chill ran down Eleonora's spine. She had known the stakes were high, but hearing Lyra speak so plainly about the consequences of failure made the threat feel far more real. Then what do we do? Eleonora asked, her voice tight with determination. How do we stop them? Lyra took a step back, raising her hands. In that moment, Eleonora felt a wave of energy surge through the garden, a power that pulsed from Lyra's very being, rippling through the air. We gather the guardians. You are not the only one who has been chosen, Eleonora. There are others, keepers of memories, protectors of the past who have long been hidden, scattered across the world. Each of them holds a piece of the puzzle, a key to stopping the forgetting ones. Eleonora's mind raced. She had to find them. The guardians. Those who had been left behind, who had watched over the threads of time, just as she had. They were the ones who could help her, guide her, and fight alongside her in this battle. I will go, Eleonora said, her voice firm with resolve. I'll find them. Lyra smiled again, this time with a knowing look in her eyes. You are ready, Eleonora, she said. But be wary. The forgetting ones are not easily defeated. They will stop at nothing to rewrite history. They will come for you, and they will come for them. Eleonora's heart skipped a beat. Ooh. Lyra's expression became serious. The keepers of memory are bound to time, but they are not invincible. The forgetting ones have learned how to reach them, how to twist their memories, how to destroy their essence. You will need all your strength to protect them. And yourself. Eleonora stood tall, her hand resting on the key at her neck. I'll protect them. I'll protect everything. Lyra stepped back, her form beginning to shimmer, as if blending into the shadows of the garden. Then go, Eleonora. The path ahead is long, and the world is waiting. Before Eleonora could speak again, Lyra had vanished, the breeze around her dissipating into nothingness. Eleonora stood alone in the center of the garden, the weight of the task ahead pressing down on her once again. But this time, it was different. She was not just the listener. She was a keeper. A guardian of memories, of history, of the very threads of time. Eleonora turned toward the horizon, the map she had discovered earlier still clutched tightly in her hand. The journey ahead would take her to places unknown, to guardians scattered across the world. She would have to find them, bring them together, and stand against the forces that sought to unmake everything she had created. The future depended on her. Chapter 14, The Journey to the Forgotten Temple. The first steps away from the garden felt like stepping into a different world. The mist that had once embraced the grounds of Greymoor Cottage seemed to fade behind her, replaced by the clear sky and the endless horizon that stretched out before her. For the first time since she had made her decision, Eleonora felt a strange mix of excitement and fear. Her task was clear now. She had to find the guardians of memory, those who had hidden themselves from the world and the growing darkness. They were her only hope against the forgetting ones, and she had no choice but to seek them out wherever they may be. Eleonora had studied the map carefully before leaving, tracing the lines and symbols with her fingers. The first destination was a temple, the Forgotten Temple, hidden deep in the mountains to the north, in the heart of the Sapphire Peaks. It was said to be one of the oldest sanctuaries of the Keepers, a place where the first guardians had once gathered. If there were any answers to be found, it was here that she would start. But the journey to the temple would not be easy. The mountains were treacherous, filled with hidden dangers and wild creatures. And Eleonora had already felt the weight of the forgetting ones stirring faint at first, like a whisper in the wind, but growing stronger with each passing moment. She had no illusions about the danger ahead. With a deep breath, she adjusted the bag on her shoulder and turned toward the path that led out of the garden. She would travel light, but she carried with her the most precious things, the key, the map, and a few essential supplies. The weight of these things felt like both a blessing and a burden. As she passed through the gate that separated the garden from the rest of the world, Eleonora paused for a moment. She looked back at the garden she had created, the world she had fought so hard to protect. It was more than just a place, it was a symbol of her choice, a testament to the power of memory and creation. I will return, she whispered to herself. I will not let them erase this. With that promise, she began her journey toward the Sapphire Peaks, stepping out into the world beyond. The road to the temple. The road to the mountains was long, winding through dense forests and across rivers that ran fast and cold. As Eleonora traveled, the landscape changed. The trees grew sparse as she climbed higher, the air growing thinner and colder with each step. But she pressed on, determined to find the temple and the guardians hidden there. The first few days were relatively uneventful. She encountered small villages, where she traded supplies and gathered information about the mountain paths. Most villagers spoke in hushed tones about the peaks, warning her of the dangers that lay ahead: the wild beasts, the treacherous cliffs, and the eerie, unnatural silence that seemed to hang over the area as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. Still, Eleonora did not hesitate. Her resolve only grew stronger with each passing day. She knew that time was running out, that the forgetting ones were moving, that they would stop at nothing to rewrite history. On the fourth day, as she neared the foothills of the Sapphire Peaks, she felt a shift in the air. The whispers of the past grew louder, more insistent, like a chorus of voices calling out to her. She paused, listening. The wind had changed, carrying with it a familiar scent: rain and stone. And then she heard it, the faintest hum. Eleonora's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just the wind. It was something else, something alive. She followed the sound, her footsteps light on the ground as she navigated the narrow mountain trail. The hum grew louder, more distinct, until she found herself standing before a massive cliff face. At first, she thought it was just part of the mountain, but as she moved closer, she saw that there was something more to it. A doorway. It was carved into the rock, the symbols of the keepers etched deeply into the stone. The door seemed ancient, weathered by time, but still strong, a reminder of the guardians who had once passed through it. Eleonora stepped forward, her hand brushing against the stone. She could feel the hum in her bones now, the energy of the mountain and the memories it held. The door wasn't just a physical barrier. It was a threshold, a barrier between what was and what could be. With a deep breath, she placed her hand on the door. The hum stopped. For a moment, there was silence. And then, slowly, the stone shifted. The door opened. The forgotten temple. Eleonora stepped through the door into the heart of the temple. Inside, the air was cool and dry, and the walls were lined with ancient tapestries, their colors faded but still rich in detail. The floor was smooth stone, worn down by centuries of footsteps. And in the center of the room was a large altar, surrounded by candles that flickered softly, their flames casting long shadows across the walls. At first, Eleonora thought she was alone, but then she heard a faint footstep, followed by the sound of rustling fabric. She turned. And there, standing in the shadows, was a figure. It was a woman, tall, with long white hair that shimmered in the dim light. She was draped in a cloak of midnight blue, the edges embroidered with silver runes. Her eyes gleamed with an unnatural light, sharp and intelligent, as though she had seen the passing of countless ages. "You have come," the woman said, her voice like a song woven from starlight. the listener. Eleanora Vale. Eleanora's heart skipped a beat. She had expected to find the guardians, but this woman, she was something else. You are not alone, the woman continued, stepping into the light. There are others. Others who will help you. But first, you must prove your worth. Eleanora's mind raced. Prove her worth. What did that mean? The woman smiled, a knowing smile, as if she could hear Eleanora's thoughts. There is a trial, Eleanora. One that every keeper must face. It is not about strength. It is not about courage. It is about choice. Eleanora stepped forward, her resolve hardening. She was ready. She had made her choice before. And she would make it again. What must I do? Eleanora asked, her voice steady. The woman's eyes glimmered. You must face your past, Eleanora. Your memories. Your greatest fear. Chapter 15, The Trial of Memory. The air in the forgotten temple was still, heavy with the weight of centuries of silence. The woman in midnight blue stood before Eleanora, her eyes gleaming with an unsettling knowing, as if she could peer into the very heart of the young keeper. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across the walls, and the temple itself seemed to breathe, alive with the energy of memories long forgotten. You have come seeking the guardians, the woman said softly, her voice like the soft rustling of leaves. But to truly understand the role you now hold, you must first face what binds you. The memories you carry, the choices you have made. Eleanora's heart quickened in her chest. She felt the weight of the woman's words, heavy with meaning. Bind. What did that mean? She had already made her choice to create and preserve, to defend what was and what could be. What else could there be to face? I don't understand, Eleanora said, her voice trembling slightly. What do you mean by binding? The woman's eyes softened, and she stepped closer, her presence both calm and overpowering. Your memories, Eleanora, she said, her voice now more solemn. They are your greatest strength. But they are also your greatest burden. You must face them. Confront the fear that binds you to the past. Only then can you truly become the keeper of both past and future. Eleanora stood frozen, the weight of the woman's words pressing heavily on her. She had thought she was ready. She had thought that she had already chosen, but now, in this ancient place, surrounded by the memories of those who had come before her, she could feel something deep inside her stir a fear, ancient and buried, that she had long tried to forget. I am ready, Eleanora said, forcing the words from her lips, though she could feel her heart racing. I will face whatever it is I must. The woman nodded, her eyes never leaving Eleanora's. Very well. Then the trial shall begin. With a sudden wave of her hand, The air around them seemed to shift, the walls of the temple blurring, fading into a void of shifting lights. Eleonora blinked and found herself no longer standing in the forgotten temple, but in a place she didn't recognize, a place from her past, long buried. It was a room, familiar in its warmth and softness. There was a fireplace crackling in the corner, casting a gentle glow, and the walls were lined with bookshelves, filled with old books and scrolls. A soft rug covered the floor, and the scent of lavender and old paper hung in the air. Eleonora's breath caught in her throat. It was the library of her childhood. She turned, and there, seated at the desk, was a figure she would never forget, her mother. She was younger now, her face full of warmth, her eyes soft and loving. Her hair, long and dark, fell in soft waves over her shoulders, and she was humming a soft tune as she worked. Eleonora could see the way her mother's hands moved, the way she held her pen, the way she smiled whenever she found a new idea. Eleonora's heart ached. The memories came flooding back of the days she had spent in this very room, of the way her mother had read to her, told her stories, and taught her everything she knew. Mother. Her voice cracked as she spoke, and her mother looked up. Eleonora, she said with a smile, her voice as gentle as Eleonora remembered. Come sit with me, darling. Eleonora stepped forward, but as she did, a cold sensation crept into her chest. She looked down at her mother, at the warm, familiar smile that should have comforted her, but instead, it felt like a lie. The fear in her chest began to rise, and her voice faltered. You're not really here, Eleonora whispered. You're not real. This is just a memory. Her mother's smile faded, replaced with a distant look. Do you still remember what happened, Eleonora? Do you remember why I am no longer here? Eleonora's chest tightened. She had buried that memory. The day her mother had passed. The day the light had gone out of her life. The memory of loss that she had never truly confronted. The room around her shifted again. The shelves trembled, and the walls seemed to crack. The warmth of the fire was replaced with an icy cold that seemed to gnaw at her very soul. She looked down at her mother again, but the figure was no longer smiling. The warmth was gone. The memories she had locked away rushed forward with brutal force, filling her mind with images of a life lost, a love broken. She remembered the day her mother had passed, the weight of that grief, the feeling of being utterly alone in the world. No, Eleonora whispered, stepping backward. This isn't real. I don't want to remember. But her mother's face was still there, her eyes now cold and empty, staring into Eleonora's soul. You cannot avoid this, Eleonora, the figure said, its voice growing hollow. You must face your fear. You cannot protect the future if you are still bound by the past. Eleonora staggered back, her chest tight with panic. The wall seemed to close in on her, the library shifting into a shadowy void, and her mother's figure twisted into something dark, something wrong. The darkness swirled around her, consuming everything. The bookshelves, the rug, the fire, all were swallowed by the emptiness, leaving only the cold void behind. Eleonora fell to her knees, clutching her chest, feeling the suffocating weight of her memories. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't see. The fear was overwhelming. But then, in the darkness, she heard a soft whisper. "You are stronger than this, Eleonora." The voice was familiar. Warm. It was her mother's voice, but this time, it was not filled with sorrow. It was filled with hope. Eleonora looked up, her vision clearing. She could see the figure of her mother standing before her, no longer twisted, no longer dark. "You are ready, Eleonora." Her mother's voice was gentle. "You are the keeper now." Eleonora stood slowly, the darkness fading, the cold lifting from her chest. The figure of her mother smiled at her one last time, and as the vision of the library faded away, her mother's words lingered in her heart. "You are the listener. You must face your past to protect your future." Eleonora closed her eyes, taking a deep breath as the world around her solidified once again. The garden, the forgotten temple, it all returned, and she was back where she had started. The trial was over. But now, she was different. Her fear had been faced, her memories confronted. She was no longer bound by the past. She was free to protect the future, to create and preserve what had been lost, and to guide those who needed her. Chapter 16, The Gathering of the Keepers. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a warm, golden glow over the landscape as Eleonora stepped away from the forgotten temple. The temple itself, though ancient and steeped in memories, had offered no answers on its own, only a test. A test of her own fears, her past, and her readiness to face what lay ahead. Her heart still felt the tremors of the trial she had just endured, but she could feel something else now, a sense of clarity, a deep inner strength that hadn't been there before. She was no longer the listener of memories alone. She had become their guardian. The choice had been made. As Eleonora made her way through the winding mountain paths, she felt a sense of purpose driving her forward. She no longer questioned herself. She knew what she had to do, and she knew the stakes. The forgetting ones were coming. The forces that sought to undo time, to erase the very fabric of the world, were stirring. She had seen it, felt it, and now she had to act before it was too late. The guardians she sought were scattered across the world, hiding, waiting for the one who would come to unite them. But they were not just protectors of memories, they were the anchors of time itself. Without them, Eleonora would not stand a chance. The first on her list was Seraphine, a guardian who had long been believed to have vanished from the world. Seraphine's name had been whispered in the temples of old, her role as a keeper shrouded in mystery. If Eleonora could find her, she would have the first true ally in her fight against the forgetting ones. The journey ahead was perilous. It would take Eleonora across vast deserts, into ancient ruins, through forgotten forests, and into cities that were little more than shadowed memories now. Each step would bring her closer to finding the guardians, but it would also bring her closer to the forces of darkness that sought to unmake everything she had fought for. The Desert of Shadows. Days turned to weeks as Eleonora traveled, her mind focused, her heart determined. She had made her way from the mountains, through dense forests, and now found herself standing on the edge of the Desert of Shadows, a vast, barren stretch of land that few dared to cross. The wind blew dry and hot, carrying with it the scent of dust and ancient stone. The desert had long been a place of mystery. It was said that those who ventured into the heart of the desert never returned, swallowed whole by its sands. But Eleonora had no choice. She had to press on. The ruins of an ancient city, hidden somewhere in the heart of the desert, held the key to finding Seraphine. With each step she took, the oppressive heat of the desert threatened to swallow her, but her resolve held firm. She had faced her fears. Now, she would face the elements themselves. The days were long, the nights cold, and the sun relentless. But it wasn't the heat that worried her, it was the feeling she had in her bones, the sense that something watched her. The desert was alive with secrets, and she could feel them tugging at the edges of her consciousness. As the sun began to set on the fifth day, Eleonora came upon the ruins. The city had once been grand, a sprawling civilization lost to time, now reduced to crumbled stone and forgotten temples. But there was something about this place. The air hummed with ancient power. She approached the largest of the ruins, an imposing structure made of stone pillars twisted and cracked with age. As she stepped closer, a figure appeared in the shadows, a woman cloaked in flowing robes, her face obscured by the hood of her cloak. "You seek Seraphine," the woman's voice echoed, deep and resonant. Eleonora froze. How did she know? The woman stepped forward, her eyes glowing with an inner light, her face soft yet full of strength. She was tall, with a presence that felt both ancient and new. "I am Seraphine," the woman said, her voice filled with quiet power. "I knew you would come, Eleonora Vale. The world has shifted, and the Keeper has found her path." Eleonora's heart leapt. The guardian she had sought was here, in the heart of the desert, waiting for her. "I've come to seek your help," Eleonora said, her voice steady but filled with urgency. "The forgetting ones are coming. We need to stand together. I need you to help me protect the world." Seraphine's expression softened, and she stepped closer, placing a hand on Eleonora's shoulder. "You've done well to come this far," Seraphine said. "But the road ahead is not so simple. The forgetting ones are more than mere creatures of darkness. They are beings of time, untethered from the world as we know it. And they seek to unravel the very fabric of our existence. You will need more than just strength to defeat them. You will need to understand the flow of time itself." Eleonora nodded, absorbing Seraphine's words. She had known it wouldn't be easy, but hearing it so plainly made the threat all the more real. "We need to gather the other guardians," Eleonora said. "There are more of us. Together, we can stop the forgetting ones." I can't do this alone. Seraphine's eyes glimmered, and she stepped back, lifting her arms to the sky. You are not alone, Eleonora. The guardians are many, and the threads of time are intertwined with each of us. But you must remember you are not just a keeper of memories. You are the listener, the one who can hear the past, present, and future. You must trust in your connection to the world, for it will guide you. Eleonora took a deep breath, her resolve strengthening. This was it. The first guardian had joined her cause. But the road ahead would be long and fraught with danger. Still, for the first time since she had stepped into this world, Eleonora felt a deep sense of hope. The guardians were not just figures in stories. They were real. And together, they would face the darkness. Chapter 17, The Next Guardian. The journey ahead was long, but Eleonora and Seraphine traveled with renewed purpose. With the first guardian now by her side, Eleonora felt the weight of the world shift. The burden had not lifted, but the promise of allies, those who shared the same duty to protect the past, present, and future, brought a flicker of light into the darkening world. The desert was behind them, and now they found themselves traversing the dense etherwood forest, a sprawling woodland that was said to hold the second guardian, a being who had long been hidden in the depths of the earth, a protector of ancient knowledge. This guardian, unlike Seraphine, was said to be elusive, moving between the realms of dreams and reality, a creature of the night. Eleonora had heard stories of the Shade Walker, as the guardian was known. It was said that the Shade Walker was both mortal and immortal, bound by neither the laws of time nor the physical world. It was said that those who sought the Shade Walker would need more than just strength, they would need the ability to navigate the space between worlds. Eleonora had little understanding of what that meant, but Seraphine's calm presence was reassuring. The older guardian seemed to understand more than she let on, her serene nature never wavering even as the forest grew darker around them. The air in Etherwood was thick with the scent of moss and damp earth. Towering trees, their trunks twisted and gnarled, reached high above them, blocking much of the sunlight. The path ahead was narrow, lined with roots that seemed to twist and move on their own, as though the forest itself were alive watching them. Eleonora's hand rested on the hilt of her blade, the weight of it grounding her, reminding her of her mission. She had to stay focused. The forgetting ones were still out there, waiting for their chance to strike. Every moment she spent in this eerie forest was one closer to finding the next guardian and perhaps one step closer to confronting the darkness. But something in the air shifted, making Eleonora pause. The temperature dropped suddenly, and a strange sensation washed over her, as if the very fabric of reality had been torn. "Do you feel that?" she asked Seraphine, her voice barely above a whisper. Seraphine nodded, her face unreadable. "The Shade Walker is near. Be prepared, Eleonora. The forest will not give us its secrets easily." Eleonora's heart raced. She had no idea what to expect, but her senses were on high alert. She could feel the forest closing in on them, the silence becoming unnerving, the sounds of nature muted as if the very earth held its breath. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw movement. A shadow flitted between the trees, quick and fluid, like a wisp of smoke in the breeze. Eleanor's instincts kicked in, and she spun around, her hand already drawing her sword, but the figure was gone, vanished into the mist of the forest. What was that? Eleanor breathed, looking to Seraphine for guidance. The Shade Walker does not show itself easily, Seraphine said quietly. It moves between worlds, shifting in and out of reality as it pleases. But we are not here by chance, Eleonora. We have been chosen. Eleonora nodded, her grip tightening on the hilt of her blade. She knew Seraphine was right. They had not come here randomly. The Shade Walker had been waiting for them. And now, they had to prove their worth. The forest seemed to respond to their presence. The trees creaked as if shifting, and the ground beneath their feet began to feel unstable. The mist swirled thicker, and the air grew heavier. It's testing us. Eleanor's voice was firm as she spoke, though the words felt strange to her, as though they came from somewhere deep inside. The forest is testing us. Seraphine turned to her, her eyes gleaming with quiet approval. You are right. And we will pass the test, but you must be prepared to let go of what you think you know. The Shade Walker will not allow us to move forward unless we can meet it on its terms. Eleonora felt her breath catch in her throat. Let go of what she thought she knew. What did that even mean? Before she could ask, the ground beneath her feet suddenly shifted, and the world around her seemed to blur. The trees distorted, their branches twisting and warping in unnatural angles. A low, resonant hum filled the air, vibrating through the ground, the trees, and the very air she breathed. A voice, both familiar and alien, whispered from the shadows. You seek the Shade Walker, keeper of time. But to find what you seek, you must first be lost. Eleonora spun around, her eyes wide. The voice had come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. It seemed to emanate from the very earth beneath her feet, reverberating through her bones. Lost. Eleonora said, her voice steady despite the growing sense of unease. What do you mean? I'm not lost. The figure of the Shade Walker emerged from the mist, its form barely visible, like a shadow without a body. Its outline shimmered, flickering between the tangible and intangible, as if it were both part of the forest and something far beyond it. You are not yet ready, Keeper, the Shade Walker's voice echoed, now louder, clearer. It sounded like the wind through the trees, ancient and filled with sorrow. You are bound to time. But you have not yet embraced it? Eleonora stepped forward, her heart pounding. What must I do? She demanded. What must I face to move forward? The Shade Walker's form shifted, its body rippling like a pool of water disturbed by a stone. You must surrender your past. Only then will you understand the future. Time flows, and all who seek to walk it must learn to move freely, not bound by the past, nor the future. A flash of memory hit Eleonora like a wave crashing against a cliffside. She remembered her childhood, her mother's smile, the pain of loss, the fear of losing what she had built. The memories flooded her mind, overwhelming her, pushing her to the edge of breaking. The Shadewalker was right. She was still bound by those memories, those fears. They were weighing her down, holding her in place, preventing her from truly moving forward. Surrender the past. The voice of the Shadewalker whispered again, its presence now towering over her. Only then will you see the way forward. Eleonora closed her eyes, her mind racing. The past, it was a part of her. But it was also what kept her tethered. The choice was hers. Could she let go of the past to protect the future? She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of it all, the responsibility, the memories, the fear. And then, with one final breath, she let go. The world shifted. Chapter 18, The Price of Time. The moment Eleonora let go, the world around her seemed to fracture and reshape itself. The forest that had once felt alive with dark energy now felt almost tranquil. The oppressive weight that had gripped her heart began to dissipate, like a cloud lifting from her mind. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt lighter, freer. But that freedom came at a cost. As she opened her eyes, the landscape before her seemed to have shifted. The trees around her were no longer twisted and gnarled, instead, they were tall and towering, their branches reaching high into the sky. The fog that had lingered for days had cleared, revealing a landscape bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. The air was cool, crisp, and still. The Shadewalker was no longer a figure in the shadows. It was now standing before her, its form clearer than before. A being of light and darkness, shifting between realms like a reflection on water. Its figure flickered in and out of existence, its edges undefined. And in its eyes, Eleonora could see the weight of time itself, the countless moments, the endless flow of history, and the possibility of all that was yet to come. You have done it, Keeper. The voice of the Shadewalker echoed through the air, resonating deep within her bones. You have let go. The past no longer binds you. Eleonora stepped forward, her chest rising and falling with each breath. She felt as though she had stepped into a new world, one that was both familiar and entirely alien. But the Shadewalker's words struck her. Letting go, she had surrendered the past. Was this the price of moving forward? What now? Eleonora asked, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. She could feel the weight of the future pressing on her, the enormity of her responsibility weighing heavily on her. The Shadewalker's form rippled, its edges blending into the mist that had returned to the forest. Now, you must understand, Eleonora. The voice was quieter now, more solemn. Time is not linear. It is a cycle, an endless spiral of memories, choices, and consequences. The past is not something to be discarded or erased, it is the foundation upon which the future is built. But you must understand its power. You must not cling to it. It is not yours to control. Eleanor's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean by that? She could feel her pulse quickening, her mind racing with questions. How do I protect the future if I am still bound by the memories of the past? The Shadewalker's figure shifted, now standing in front of her. The mist around them swirled, like the very fabric of reality itself bending to the Shadewalker's will. The future is not a fixed thing, Eleanora, the Shadewalker explained. It is fluid, constantly changing with each choice you make. But each choice has a consequence, and each consequence ripples through time. The forgetting ones seek to erase those consequences to undo the threads of the world. They believe that by unmaking the past, they can create a world where nothing matters, where nothing is remembered. Eleanora felt a chill run down her spine. The forgetting ones, they were dangerous, but she had no true understanding of how powerful they were, or what they could do. They want to unmake time, she said softly, more to herself than to the Shadewalker. But that would mean erasing everything. Every memory. Every choice. The Shadewalker nodded, its figure flickering in the light. Yes, Keeper. That is their goal. To destroy time, to destroy the very essence of what makes this world what it is. But you have chosen a different path. You must protect the threads, Eleanora. You must safeguard the memories that hold the fabric of existence together. Eleanora nodded, though her mind was still spinning. How do I fight them? How do I protect the memories of the world if they can just erase them? The Shadewalker's gaze softened, though it still held an unsettling weight. You cannot fight them with force, Eleanora. The forgetting ones are not bound by the same laws as you. They are creatures of nothingness, able to slip through the cracks of time. But you are different. You are the listener. You can hear the past and the future. You can move between the threads of time, weaving them together to protect what must be protected. Eleanora felt a shiver of realization run through her. She had always known she was different, but now, in this moment, she understood what that truly meant. She wasn't just a keeper of memories, she was the keeper of the threads of time itself. She had the ability to shape the future and preserve the past not by erasing what came before, but by understanding and guiding it. But how can I stop them? She asked, her voice filled with determination. If they can slip through time, how do I find them? The Shadewalker's eyes glimmered with an ancient wisdom. You have already begun, Eleanora. You have found the first guardian. And the others will come to you, as they are bound to the flow of time, just as you are. The forgetting ones cannot remain hidden for long. They are connected to the very fabric of time, and they will reveal themselves to you when the time is right. Eleanor's chest tightened. It wasn't just about finding the guardians, it was about understanding the very nature of time itself, of protecting the memories that held the world together. She was not just a protector, she was a weaver of the very threads of existence. "I'll do whatever it takes," Eleonora said, her voice resolute. The Shadewalker nodded once more, and the shadows around them began to recede. "You are ready, Eleonora. But remember this: the price of time is not easily paid. The future will be shaped by your choices, and those choices will ripple through the world, forever altering the course of history. You must be ready to face the consequences of your actions, for they will shape the world in ways you cannot yet understand." As the Shadewalker's form began to fade, Eleonora stood in the clearing, her heart heavy with the weight of what lay ahead. The future was hers to protect, but it would come with great sacrifices. She had chosen this path, and now she had to walk it through time, through memories, and through the ever-present shadows that sought to destroy what she had worked so hard to protect. The Shadewalker's last words echoed in her mind as it vanished into the night. "The future is not fixed, Eleonora. But your choice will define it." Chapter 19, The Unraveling. The stars above flickered faintly, casting a pale light over the desolate lands stretching before Eleonora. The wind howled, carrying with it the scent of dust and ancient secrets. She had left the Shadewalker behind, the forest fading from her mind like a distant dream, but its words haunted her. The future is not fixed. Your choice will define it. Eleonora clutched the map that had guided her thus far, the path ahead uncertain. Seraphine had traveled with her for some time, but now the time had come for them to part ways. The other guardians were scattered across the world, each one in hiding, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. Seraphine had pointed her toward the next guardian, a mysterious figure known only as Viren, the Keeper of Silence. A being said to be connected to the very fabric of the world's forgotten places, the keeper of ancient knowledge lost to the sands of time. His location was marked on the map, but the journey would be arduous. Seraphine's departure left Eleonora with the weight of time itself pressing against her chest. The forgetting ones were closing in, and their presence was already beginning to disrupt the natural flow of history. The shadows at the edge of her vision seemed to move with an unsettling purpose, always just out of reach but never far enough away to feel safe. The next stop would take her through the caverns of eternity, a network of tunnels rumored to hold the entrance to a long-forgotten city. The city's name had been lost, as had its secrets, but it was said that Viren had once lived there, now only an echo in the wind. The caverns of eternity. The caverns loomed before Eleonora like the mouth of some great beast, yawning wide as if to swallow her whole. The walls of the cave were jagged, dark rock, and the faintest traces of glowing moss illuminated the path. The air inside was damp, cool, and filled with the scent of old earth. The ground beneath her feet was uneven, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the vast, hollow spaces. Her heart beat steadily, but her thoughts raced. She could feel the forgetting ones out there, those who wished to tear apart the very fabric of existence, to unmake all that was. Their influence was growing stronger with each passing day, and the world as she knew it seemed to be unraveling. The deeper she ventured into the caverns, the more oppressive the air became. It was as though the tunnels themselves were alive, pulsating with ancient energy, and Eleonora could feel it humming in her veins. The walls seemed to shift, and the path ahead was constantly changing, as though the very cavern was testing her resolve. Hours passed, but Eleonora kept moving, her feet carrying her through the dark labyrinth, driven by an unshakable determination to find the guardian of silence. Her mind was focused on one thing: she had to reach Viren before the forgetting ones could find him, or worse, erase him from existence entirely. Suddenly, the air around her grew still, and a strange sense of calm settled over her. She stopped in her tracks, sensing a presence, something ancient and deep. The silence in the cavern was suffocating, but it felt different, welcoming, almost. As Eleonora stepped forward, the silence enveloped her. It wasn't a typical silence, it was profound, a silence that felt as though the very fabric of reality had paused. The world itself seemed to hold its breath. And then, in the distance, she saw it, a light, dim and flickering, emanating from the deepest part of the cavern. The light was like a distant star, pulsating with energy. It was faint, but unmistakable. Eleonora moved toward it, the light drawing her in like a moth to the flame. As she approached, the ground beneath her shifted, and a door of solid stone appeared before her, its surface engraved with intricate symbols she recognized from her visions. Viren. The symbol seemed to glow faintly as she placed her hand against the door. The light intensified, and the stone before her shifted. A voice, soft and distant, echoed in the stillness. Eleonora Vale. Eleonora's heart skipped a beat. The voice was not one she recognized, but it was not unfamiliar either. It was like a memory that was just out of reach, a whisper of something long forgotten. You have come. The voice grew clearer, more present, and with it, the door began to open. The stone creaked and groaned, as though something ancient was awakening from its long slumber. The door opened fully, revealing a chamber bathed in soft, ethereal light. The walls of the chamber were lined with shelves, filled with scrolls, tomes, and artifacts long lost to history. At the center of the room stood a figure, tall and cloaked in darkness, yet emanating a calming presence. His face was hidden, obscured by shadows, but his voice filled the room like the echo of an ancient song. You have found me, Eleonora. The figure's voice was deep, resonating through the very air around her. I am Viren, keeper of silence. Eleonora stepped into the chamber, her eyes scanning the space around her, filled with knowledge long forgotten. She could feel the weight of the room, the secrets it held. I've come to ask for your help, she said, her voice steady. The forgetting ones are coming. We need to stand together, Viren. The world needs you. Viren did not immediately respond. Instead, he stood motionless, as if weighing her words carefully. Then, he slowly reached up, removing his hood. Eleonora's breath caught in her throat as she looked into his eyes that seemed to hold all of time itself. They were deep, endless, full of knowledge and sorrow. You have already made the decision, Eleonora. His voice was soft but filled with a gravity that shook her to her core. But there is something you must understand. Eleonora stepped closer, her heart pounding in her chest. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The future you seek to protect is not without sacrifice." Viren's eyes locked onto hers. "The world cannot be saved without a price. The past, the memories, the future, it is all intertwined. The threads of time are fragile, and once they are disturbed, they can never be fully mended." Eleonora's pulse quickened. "What are you saying? What price must I pay?" Viren's gaze softened, though his eyes still carried the weight of countless ages. "The cost of saving the world is not just the past, Eleonora. It is also the future. You will have to choose. To protect one, you may have to sacrifice the other." Chapter 20, The Ties That Bind. Eleonora stood in the heart of the chamber, the weight of Viren's words hanging heavily in the air around her. His eyes, deep and full of secrets, seemed to look right through her, as though he could see the very soul of her being, the fears she had buried, the memories she had locked away. The past, the present, and the future, they were all tangled, intertwined in ways she had never fully understood until now. The cost of saving the world is not just the past, Eleonora. It is also the future. Viren's words echoed in her mind, resounding like a thunderclap in the stillness of the chamber. She took a step back, her heart racing as the realization dawned on her. The path she had chosen, the path to protect the memories of the world, to safeguard the threads of time, had brought her to this moment. But now, she was forced to confront the greatest truth of all. To protect one, she would have to sacrifice the other. The air around her seemed to grow thicker as the weight of her decision pressed against her chest. She could feel the forgetting ones growing stronger with each passing moment, their presence threatening to unravel everything she had worked for. If she chose to protect the future, the world she had fought so hard to preserve would be lost. The memories of those who had lived, loved, and fought before her would be wiped away. But if she chose to safeguard the past, she would sacrifice the future, the possibility of what could be. The world would be stuck in a loop, bound to the past, unable to grow, unable to evolve. Eleonora felt the pain of this choice deep in her bones. The love she had for the world she had created, the people she had known, the memories she had preserved, tugged at her heart. But there was something else, a duty to the future, to the people who had yet to be born, to the world that would continue to evolve beyond her understanding. For the first time in her life, she felt the weight of time pressing down on her, both the weight of what had come before and the weight of what was yet to come. "What should I do, Viren?" Eleonora whispered, her voice cracking with the intensity of the decision that lay before her. "How can I protect both?" Viren's gaze softened, and he took a step forward, his form flickering between the tangible and intangible, like a shadow caught in the light. "You cannot protect both, Eleonora." His voice was gentle, but firm. "But you can protect what matters most." Eleonora felt a sharp pang in her chest. What mattered most? How could she choose between the past and the future when both were so deeply entwined within her soul? "You have always been the listener, Eleonora, Viren continued. You have heard the past, and you have felt the future. But now, you must make your choice. It is not about what you preserve, it is about what you leave behind. Eleonora closed her eyes, her heart heavy with the weight of the truth. She knew what Viren was saying. She knew that in order to protect the world, she had to make a sacrifice. There was no easy path, no simple answer. It was a choice between the world as it had been and the world as it could be. She opened her eyes, her decision clear in her heart. I choose the future, she said, her voice steady but filled with the raw emotion of her choice. I will protect what is yet to come. I will let go of the past so that the world can grow, can evolve. Viren nodded, his expression full of understanding. It is done, Eleonora. The world will remember, but it will also move forward. The past will remain in your heart, in the memories you carry, but it will no longer define the world. The future will be shaped by your choice. Eleonora felt the ground beneath her feet shift, the very fabric of reality rippling as if in response to her decision. The chamber around her seemed to pulse with energy, and she could feel the threads of time weaving themselves together in a new pattern, a pattern that would allow the world to continue, to evolve, to grow. The forgetting ones, those ancient forces that sought to erase everything, faded into the distance, their power waning in the face of her choice. The future was now in her hands, and the world would be shaped by the actions of those who would come after her. Eleonora felt the last remnants of the past fall away like autumn leaves, the weight lifting from her shoulders. She could feel the world changing, shifting, becoming something new, something beautiful. The Shadewalker's voice echoed in her mind once more, as if offering its final blessing. The future is not fixed, Eleonora. But your choice will define it. As the last of the shadows lifted, Eleonora stood tall, her heart filled with a quiet peace. She had made her choice, and with it, she had secured the future. The world would go on, shaped by the memories of the past, but driven by the possibilities of the future. Eleonora's journey had come to an end, but the threads of time would continue to weave, ever evolving, ever changing. And as the dawn broke over the horizon, she knew one thing for certain. The future was hers to protect.